This is our second lecture on Ramanujan. In this lecture, we will be talking about Ramanujan's poem, The Striders. The Strider is one of the most acknowledged and anthologized poems. As I already shared with you in the previous lecture, that by being Indo-American poet, Ramanujan seems to be influenced by the Imagist literary movement of the 20th century. The poem is a picture-perfect portrayal of a water insect named the strider, which is generally seen in the ponds and rivers of the lakes of New England. Here, we don't have to be confused by thinking that how the poet could write a poem on insect which is to be found in New England by staying in America. You all might be aware of the fact that for a long period of time, America was also one of the colonies that England had governed. In 1660, English explorer John Smith named one of the regions of America as New England. The name was officially sanctioned in 1620, and New England includes 6 states in the northeastern United States. Boston is one of the largest cities in this region. New England is known for its natural beauty, rivers, ponds, lakes, and streams. And Ramanujan writes in his footnotes of his poetry collection that the poem The Striders was composed while one of his visits to the Charles River in Boston. The poem presents a picture of a water insect which symbolize the life and work of the poetic self. Let me read the poem to you first, and then we will analyze the various aspects. Put away this dream and search for certain thin, stemmed, bubble-eyed water bugs. See them perch on dry capillary lakes, weightless on a rippled skin of a stream. No, not only prophets walk on water. This bug sits on a landslide of lights and drowns eye deep into its tiny strip of sky. The poem is composed of 2 stanzas, and each stanza is being developed as if a perfect slow motion picture of the insect. The strider is being observed moment by moment from the poet's picture's unusual and objective poetic sensibility. The water insect might be called the strider because of its physical features and its movements on the water. The strider means to walk with the long steps, as with vigor, haste, impatience, or arrogance. First line of the poem sets the tone and also gives us an idea about its setting. The poem begins as we have read, put away this dream. By this line, it seems the poet is sitting on the bank of river and contemplating on something. And among the cloud of his thoughts and contemplation, suddenly there appears an insect which catches his attention. Or you can say, he could see something amazing in the form of that tiny water insect which attains the sublimity of his thoughts. Or it disturbs the dream that he is completely absorbed into and shifts his mind from his dreamy world and follows the movements of the striders. Therefore, the line followed by the first one says, and search for certain thin, stemmed, bubble-eyed water insect. Stem means something a specific kind and center grown out of something. And bubble-eyed means the eyes are like the air-filled balloon. When you look at this picture, you'll get to know that poet suddenly concentrates on the physical appearance of this insect. And that strange appearance makes him go in search of the detail of this insect. Then he follows this movement by looking at this insect, and he writes, see them perch on a dry capillary legs, weightless on a ripple skin of a stream. What he is looking at? He looks at how this insect is resting on what? A water stream. Perch means rest on something. And how it is resting on? A dry capillary legs. Capillaries are the smallest of the body's blood vessels that has an internal diameter of hair-like thinness. Here, it doesn't apply to the blood vessels. But if you look at this insect and its structure, and the legs of these insects are like hair, are like those capillaries that we have in our body, very thin. And this thinness, tiny legs are like what? Seems to be like weightless. And that makes him what? Balance on a ripple skin of a stream. Ripple, it is a waves, a series of waves on the surface of water, especially as caused by a side breeze or an object dropping into it. That you see that, waves generally you find in the still water, specifically in lakes, because of the wind. Okay, thus the poet visualizes the strider's physical description, and that becomes the source of his ideas. It is no doubt the strider is a strange insect, but the poet makes it an object of exploration. The poem begins with the line, and search. The search refers to the infinite possibilities of ideas, some of which may be known and the rest may be unknown. Search itself stands for an exploration, not in any particular direction, nor in any specific form. In course of the search, the first thing which poet notices is the strider's bubble eye. Then he captures its capillary legs. The specific shape and the size of the leg provides the striders the ability to walk and perch on the ripple skin of a stream. At the first reading, the poem seems to be written on the line of imagist ideals. After the picture perfect description of the insect from the poetic sensibility, the poem seems to gain momentum of meaning. For some critics, stream is the symbol of universal change and of time, which is very common idea in philosophical terms. Having depicted the supreme facility with which the striders balance on the ripple skin of a stream, the poet goes on to contrast it with the remote and the metaphysically exotic or mysteriously different point of view from which it looks at the insect. If you look at this picture, it will give you an idea of the second stanza. The poet, as I said, the poet goes on to contrast the physical appearance with the remote and the metaphysically exotic or mysteriously different point of view, from which he looks at the insect. That is, he writes in the second stanza, no, not only prophets walk on water. You see, this insect is very easily walking on the water. This bug sits on a landslides of lights and drowns eye deep into its tiny strip of sky. Prophet, the reference to the prophet in this stanza refers to Jesus' walk on the water. And this tiny strip of sky, it refers to the naked or the narrow sky that this tiny bubble-eyed insect could capture. Here the poet captures the striders in its every movement and compare one of its sublime ability to walk on water with prophets. By doing this, poet links the ancient time to the present. This comparison denotes the supreme power of the Creator that embody in every particle of this universe, irrespective of the size and its form. The potentiality of the insect is heightened by comparing with the ancient prophets. In this context, Jesus walked on the water, and he also refers to some of the Indian sages who were also considered to be possessed with such a sublime power because of their knowledge and worship. It creates an impression of the fact that the poet might be speaking about power of human beings who sits on a landslide of lights. It means he is even capable of going deep into the mysteries of light or universe. Hence, the strider is not just a strange insect. Through striders, the poet refers to the human being who is very powerful in every aspect. Human beings have not only conquered lights, but also the sky. For the poet, the high sense of adventure of human beings is very significant. Therefore, he never forgets the infinite power of the human beings. The close observation of this poem could reveal an active engagement of two cultures in the poetic self. They are the traditional and modern, or in some cases, while the sensibility of the poetic self is Indian and it is influenced by the Oriental spirituality, and the attitude of dealing with the sensibility in the process of transforming it into poetry is the Western trained intellect. Here you could see the influence of Indian, that is Oriental spirituality, and the Western trained intellect. It means his education that he takes in America. So in both the ways he look at, or we could able to understand his poetry. Therefore, Parthsarthi, one of the greatest Indian modern poets, called Ramanujan's The Strider is an eye for the specific physiognomy of an object or the situation. One device he employs to achieve the precision of expression is to guard the reader from going after stroke phrases and responses by using negative of caution. That is, no, not only prophets walk on water. Ramanujan, to attend to the mentioned requirements of his poetic sensibility, makes use of language which conceals the depth of his thoughts and the themes, which conceals the depth of his thoughts as well as the language which clarifies his vision. By skillfully employing symbols and the images, the poet yoked together the outer and the inner forms of his mind and imagination. Therefore, Nissim Ezekiel, who is Ramanujan's contemporary, says that Ramanujan employs poetry as a medium to synthesize his reflective experiences and introspective perceptions and communicate the embedded meaning. Superficially, the poem The Striders is a precise picture of an insect with which the poet is preoccupied. However, the close analysis reveals the poet's literary sensibility to bring the relatively insignificant object to the level of prophetic sublimity. Ramanujan's artistic secrets lies in his combining the visual, but underneath these patterns of images one can discern their beauty and their modern consciousness. The poet's Indian sensibility projects the insect in its two extreme stages. One, when the insect is being observed in its physical appearance and the structure, and the other, when it is compared with its prophetic and divine abilities. Such word painting is possible only by a poet who has an eye for the minutest detail even of an ordinary phenomena. The poem The Striders, and the collection in which the poem is published with the same title establish Ramanujan as the poet with very microscopic sensibility, and the main structural element that one finds in this poetic sensibility is memory. To describe his language and diction, Professor Baral says, Ramanujan's poems are the real thing expressed in a delicately new way. Can a man's preoccupation with the significant lives wish away the so called insignificant ones from a world of theirs as well as ours? No, never. They are always there in the tiny strips of their sky, even if we do not see their place or do not recognize their significance. As to the poetic experience, in its romantic gloss, our world unfortunately has very limited opportunities. The memories of the last two world wars in our century and the consciousness of the shifting morals and the values of a modern life are not poetic experiences. But ironically, they are the experiences in a majority of modern poems and also have informed the majority of our time. In this context of our age, one of the critics reflects the age is one in which whatever private and limited certainties we enjoy, we are collectively certain of nothing about the infinite power that is invisible except our personal identities. Therefore, Ramanujan's cool, conscious, and concentrated weaving of a strider as thin stemmed, bubble eyed, its perching, dry capillary legs, etc., is a search for his personal identity. And this objective weaving comes to a sudden flash of resonance with the image of the prophets. It is remarkable to see how this analytical observation slowly blurs not only in diction but in ideas as well. Because the poet drowns eye deep into his sky, into his place and personal identities. The poem itself is the stability, as art is a way of transcending the flux of being. To sum up, we can see that there are three aspects which invariably emerge from all serious critical writings of Ramanujan's poetry. They are his preoccupation with the image, his making of the family as the central metaphor of his poetry, and his occasional use of the narrative mode to render the nuances of particular experiences. Apart from this, he also frequently resorts to the native themes and the traditions. An analysis of his poems brings to the light the fact that his genius mostly looks for the particular as opposed to the general. The image of the strider is particularly unique in the sense that it carries within itself a vivid sense of its distinctive quality. It has often been observed that in Ramanujan the image outturns the idea. In this respect, he has sometimes been contrasted with his contemporary Indian poet Nissim Ezekiel, in whom the idea eludes the image. R. Parthasarathi observes that in Ramanujan, the image is not only the springboard of poetic composition, but the kernel as well. According to him, the entire poem is, in fact, one image or a complex of more than one image. It is in this context that the use of the image is seminal. With this, we will conclude the discussion on the poem The Striders.